Carrabelle, a small, laid-back old Florida town, tucked away in the eastern panhandle, just west of Florida's Big Bend Gulf Coast. Carrabelle is often called the gateway to the Gulf for its numerous marinas and easy access to offshore fishing and boating. The area's only deep-water port, Carrabelle has been a host to commercial fishing industries for over 100 years and was once a hotspot for the shipping of turpentine and lumber. In fact, the Florida Department of Commerce reports that in 1899 and 1900, there were more ships in and out of the port of Carrabelle than any other port in the state of Florida. With so much rich history, Carrabelle has become a home to numerous historic cultural resources. One of the most notable cultural resource and focal point of Carrabelle is Dog Island.
Dog Island is a 7-mile-long island located about 3.5 miles off Carrabelle. We know that people have been visiting Dog Island for at least several thousand years, and in fact, a dugout canoe has been discovered on Dog Island, which archaeologists dated to be over 1,200 years old. During the Spanish and English periods of Florida's history, Dog Island and the surrounding region were very isolated, basically a vast wilderness with very few settlements or towns, and Dog Island would have been an ideal lair for pirates or hiding place for smugglers, and so it probably was used in such nefarious ways at various times throughout the colonial period. The first time we see the name Dog Island was French, Île aux Chiens, which was on a French map that dates to 1733. And then we begin to see that name on other maps in the 1700s after that. The first well-known shipwreck to have been lost at Dog Island was Le Tigre, or the Tiger. And that was a French vessel. It was en route from Haiti to New Orleans with a cargo. And it wrecked on what they called a reef. It's probably more likely a sandbar, very close to Dog Island. In fact, some of the survivors were able to make it to Dog Island. This shipwreck was famous primarily because of a man named Pierre Viot, and he was an experienced captain and a merchant who was on board that vessel, but he wrote a story. He wrote his memoirs and an adventure about his shipwreck, and that was a very lurid tale that included cannibalism. In fact, he killed his own an enslaved African, in order to survive. So a very horrible story that captured the imagination of Europeans and made Dog Island famous across the Atlantic Ocean. Towards the end of the 19th century and into the 20th century, there were two maritime industries that grew to be very important for the local economy. And one of these was the seafood industry. It's still known today, of course. We see shrimp boats going out and bringing in their harvest. But there's one example of a shipwreck related to this industry from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and that is the Priscilla. Priscilla was a fishing smack. She was built in Maine in 1893. She caught snapper in Gulf waters, and she wrecked at Dog Island in 1914. Now, Priscilla was the first shipwreck to be identified on Dog Island by archaeologists, and so she was named Dog Island Shipwreck Number 1. Of course, that's before her identity was suspected. We don't know for sure, but we believe because of the dimensions of that shipwreck, which until recently could be seen in the surf zone on the offshore side of Dog Island, but the size of that wreck matches pretty closely the known dimensions of Priscilla. So we think that she is a shipwreck that is a great representative of the seafood industry in our area. The other industry that was of great importance was the lumber trade, and this was massive. When we hear that Carrabelle was one of the busiest ports in all of Florida, that's because of the international lumber trade. And in the late 1800s, you had a period, a building boom in Europe, and so Florida pine was in huge demand. And you had ships coming from all over, as far away as Russia and Norway and Britain, but ships were coming to what today is little old Carrabelle and loading up with Florida pine, sawn lumber, planks, millions of board feet left every year for Europe. The most famous shipwreck event that ever took place at Dog Island involved vessels that were part of this international lumber trade. On August 1st, 1899, a massive and destructive hurricane swept up through the Gulf, raked Dog Island, and went right through Carrabelle. The destruction was awful. But it wasn't just the town that was devastated. Over a dozen ships were cast ashore, littering the beaches of Dog Island. Some of these were American, like the schooner James A. Garfield, but most were foreign flagged vessels, like the Norwegian lumber barks Jafnahar and Vala. Some of these wrecked vessels were refloated and put back into service, but a good number of them remain, slowly weathering over time, their timbers disappearing into the sand or beneath the waves until they were all but forgotten. 100 years later, during the 1999 Dog Island Shipwreck Survey, we returned to the site of these shipwrecks and investigated one in particular, known only as Dog Island Shipwreck Number 2, and after some good archaeological sleuthing, we were able to prove that it was the Norwegian ship Vala. It would be more than 10 years before another of these lost ships would appear from beneath the sand. So Dog Island Shipwreck Number 3 was first seen in November 2012. Since that time, sometimes it's buried, sometimes timbers protrude, but then in January of 2018, the entire length of the wreck was exposed. One entire side, the other side, the interior was still filled with sand, but you could see all of these iron knees, those are iron deck supports, all of the wooden frames or ribs. You could see copper sheathing on the outside of the hull. Copper sheets were nailed to the outside of the hull to prevent shipworms from eating the timbers. All of these are structural traits that are very similar to what we saw on the Vala. So it certainly looks like Dog Island 3 might be one of these lost lumber ships. But we would really need to do more archaeological research to confirm that. And one of the impediments to archaeological research when these ships are exposed are people coming and taking a souvenir, taking a piece of timber off, pulling a nail out. Every one of those things that might be taken from a shipwreck is a clue that could help archaeologists identify that ship by name. So as these ships appear and then disappear into the sand, they become under threat. And not just from Mother Nature or from looters, but even from well-meaning visitors. You can help preserve Florida's archaeological heritage. If you come across on the beach an old shipwreck like this one, or some other kind of archaeological site, or even an isolated artifact that appears to be historic in nature, first of all, don't remove the object. Don't take a part of the wreck. Don't move any artifacts. It's important for archaeologists studying the site to see it as it first appeared. Second of all, take plenty of photographs. Record the site without touching anything, impacting anything as best you can, and make sure you note the location of the site. You can use your phone as a GPS to get the exact location, or you can just write down some notes so that someone can find it again. And finally, make sure you report it to an archaeologist. You can call your local beach patrol. They can alert county authorities. You could talk to your local university's anthropology department. Probably the most important thing to do would be to call the State Bureau of Archaeological Research in Tallahassee and let state authorities know where it is. You could even go to your local history museum, like the Carrabelle History Museum. If you can help archaeologists preserve the rich historic treasures of Florida, like this amazing shipwreck, then we can all continue to enjoy and cherish this heritage for generations to come.